Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell me your name.
Dale Thompson,
Perfect. How old are you, Dale?
75.
Yeah. When did you serve?
I served in the Army from November 22nd, 1966 to November 1st, 1969.
So for 3 years.
3 years, yes.
Were you stationed here?
I started my basic training in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama for helicopter maintenance school. And May 1st of 67, I went to Vietnam. I left Oakland, California, and this is what I looked like then. And then I got to Vietnam, and I was a private when I first got there. And then here's one of my energetic days while I was working, putting helicopters together. And then I came back to Savannah, Georgia at Hunter Army Airfield, where I was a Cobra mechanic. And this one was before going to Korea. I went to Korea in May of 1969. And I served there until November 1st of 1969 when I got out of the Army.
It looks like you've brought some medals. Tell me a little bit about these medals and awards.
Well, they're pretty much basic medals that everyone probably gets. That was my rank. I was a Sergeant E5, and that was my sharpshooter medal. And these were just uniform patches that I wore on my work uniforms. These here are the Vietnam medal, and this is a Korean medal. And this is my Purple Heart, which I earned while I was serving in Da Nang in Vietnam on March 4th, 1968. These here are just kind of duplicates of this ribbon bar over here that you wear on your uniform. Of course, my name tag, crew chief wings, and my dog tags. This is a picture of me when I joined the Army, when I got sworn in. This is a picture of the second time that they presented the Purple Heart to me in Georgia. I already had it presented to me in Vietnam. And this is just a certificate of the Purple Heart. And this in here is a lifetime membership to the National Purple Heart Wall of Honor. Since I've came back, I've been given the Quilt of Honor, and I'm presently the Vice President of the 14th Transportation Battalion that I was in Vietnam, and it's a reunion committee where I set up reunions every 2 years with the help of others all around the United States. We have a lot of fun. I've met people that I didn't know when I was in Vietnam. They've become great friends of mine over the years. Then I came back from Vietnam and I got a job and I worked for Kmart for 33 years. So now I'm retired. I'm retired partially. I drive school bus yet, just because I like the kids, so. I enlisted, I wasn't drafted.
Yeah. From 1966 to 1969. How do you think that time in your life shaped the rest of your life?
Oh, I think it done a lot of things for me in my life. I learned a lot when I was in the service. I learned respect. I learned how to take care of myself, and I think it was a great deal. I wouldn't give it up for nothing.
Tell me a little bit about the ups and downs of the experience?
Well, I guess the downs is I joined the service on the Buddy Buddy system with Dan heard of you. He didn't make it back. The ups, well, the other down was the Purple Heart the night that I got wounded with that. A mortar attack came in, and that was not an exciting night. You know, I've got lifetime friends from Vietnam that I still today get together with. You know, and they're from different places. I've got a couple of friends out east from Korea. Them are highlights when you get to see them, you know. The ones with the 14th Transportation, of course, I see a lot of them every 2 years. It's pretty much the same people that come up or come to them. And some of them are friends that I had when I was in Vietnam, you know. So,
Do you want to talk at all about your Purple Heart?
early in the mid-morning on the 4th of March, we started getting mortared in our company area and our flight line where we had all of our helicopters, repairs and things like that. And it just, most mortar attacks didn't last long. It was probably a half hour to 45 minutes, but they did considerable damage to our company area. The one that I got my Purple Heart from actually blew up right in front of my tent. I lived in a large tent for all the time I was over there, and it was probably maybe 25 feet away, 20 feet, someplace like that. And it blew a hole probably as deep as his desk in the sand. And that's probably what saved me, was the sand that it exploded in, and I just got a little of the shrapnel from it. The concussion, I remember, was horrific. You know, it just blew you across the tent. After it was all over, all you did was run around and make sure all your buddies was okay, you know, even with your wound. And I wasn't even going to go to the doctor, but they said, no, you need to, because it could have poison in it or something. And the wound was, it was minor, I guess. I went to work the next day, so it couldn't have been too bad. I spent most of the night at the clinic area, going filling out paperwork and all that stuff.
You said you got the Purple Heart twice? They awarded it to you twice?
Well, they awarded it to me in Da Nang in Vietnam, in the company area, and then when I was in Georgia, they hired a photographer and had my wife come in, and then they called me off the flight line, and told me I had to go to the commander's office, and I didn't know what for. And that's what it was for. They just gave it, and I said, well, you've already had this awarded to me once. And he said, well, we got orders to give it to you again. So that's what happened.
Were you and your wife together through your military experience?
Just from January through April, we were in Savannah, Georgia together. The rest of we weren't married then. I was married in December of '68. And then in January of '69, we went down to Savannah, Georgia, and stayed there for 4 months. And then we came home, and I went to Korea, and she stayed here.
Boy, what was that like?
Well, I guess, you know, it was better than it could have been. That's the way I look at it, you know.
Yeah.
I could either not come back, or if she'd have been a widow, or, you know, feel sorry for some of them people that happened to her. It was another learning experience. You know, we were separated. We've now been married 55 years almost, so.
Congratulations.
Didn't hurt us.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder, right?
Yeah.
Any last words or any words of advice for people who may be considering a military career?
I think I'm a firm believer that everyone should go serve at least 2 years in some kind of military and get away from your parents and actually grow up and learn how to live on your own and fend for yourself. It's just a gift, I think, and I think everybody should want to do that.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
And thanks for doing this interview.
The pleasure and honor was all mine.
Thank you.
Richard Josie.
How old are you?
I'll be 80 in a month.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
So, your dates of service, you've got 1962 to 1993. Tell me a little bit about that.
I joined the Army Reserve in 1962, and I was in the Medical Corps for 4 years. And just before I got out, I was head ward master of a 40-man ward. And then I took a break for 4 years. And then I joined the Army Reserves and the Engineers, and that's where I finished my service in there. And it was a utility engineer unit, and I was in there for a while. Then I needed promotion, so I took over a well drilling unit. Then I spent a year and a half in that one, then went back to the utility engineers again. I got to see almost the whole world. I've been everywhere, just through the reserves. I started out as a private in the medics, made it to E5, and went to the engineers. I started out as a specialist 4th class, and I wound up as construction supervisor / first sergeant. And we were all over, mostly building schools and building roads like Panama, Honduras, Germany. And I think the biggest thing we had was build a little tower, not a little, a big tower, on a little island in Tonga. It was what you call atoll. I think there's nothing there but one building, which we housed some of our tools. There was no power on the island, and there was a portable army generator at the bottom, which went half underwater every night when the tide came in. That's all we had for power. And we wound up building this tower with no crane or nothing. 4 telephone poles, we carried them up the steps by rank. We had 21 people, carried them all up by hand and set them by hand. We made a crossbuck bar to lift them up, and then ropes so it wouldn't go too far. Everything was by hand, and we did that in 14 days. We built that tower. And then on the way over, we went through a hurricane, and lucky it was at night because it was an old Navy boat, what you see on beach landings where the front goes down. That's what we went across, 25 hours on that boat. And I didn't know until we got home. The guy told me we went through a hurricane. He was an ex-Navy man. Said we went through a hurricane. Lucky it was at night, because if it would have been during the daytime, it would have been bad to see. It was storming. Wow. All we had over us was a canvas top, and we had nothing on the bottom but pallets with rocks that they delivered to little islands on the way. And slept on a tarp and our sleeping bag, and our duffel bags. That was our pillow. And it was a very memorable trip. I guess that was the highlight of my military career. I mean, what we accomplished with no cranes or tools, it was unbelievable. But yes, I was proud of it, yes.
I'm thinking you must have at times thought, geez, I wonder if this is what the Egyptians went through. I wonder if this is what the Mayans went through. How did they build those amazing features?
I got a certificate because I was one of the guys there's me and a full-time Army guy that drew up the plans for this whole project. And we made it through the whole thing without any accidents, nothing. And what everybody went through, like I said, I was in Panama and Honduras, and to see what these people live like, it really makes you appreciate what we have. It's unbelievable, you know, but they don't know what we have. So yeah, it's an eye-opener. You know. I loved it. I'd do it again if I had to, but like I said, I got to see a lot of the world. I would have never seen it otherwise. You know.
It sounds to me like you went into that too with not an engineering background. You went in with a kind of a medic background, but no engineering.
No.
How did you learn it?
I had just experience, I guess. When I went back into the engineering unit, I went in as an equipment operator through my civilian acquired skill. And then I just picked up stuff by watching, and a lot of it was just common sense, you know. Which, at that, I guess my age, when we were younger, there was a lot of more common sense. You know, I don't want to say what happens now, but, you know. I still have to look at the video sometimes. We had made a video of the whole thing to really appreciate how we did that. You know, it's mind-boggling. To bring stuff up, we had one guy that worked, his MOS or job skill was to climb telephone poles, you know. So he was the one that'd go up and he'd rig up block and tackle for pulling stuff up. And, I mean, it's just, it was so, it was neat the way we did everything, you know. But, oh yeah, we were really proud of that project. Yeah.
I wonder what it looks like today.
I'd love to go back there. We didn't know exactly. They said it was a lookout tower, but we heard later that the New Zealanders probably wanted it for like a prison camp, that they were going to build something. I don't know. That was the closest big country, was New Zealand, to where we were at.
Do you stay in touch with any of those people that you were there with?
Do I what?
Do you stay in touch with any of them?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. Some of my best friends are all people I met out there. Oh, yeah. My wife isn't alive anymore, but she wasn't happy when I went back in the service, you know. But towards the end, she was glad I did. And our best friends all came through there, you know. And still to this day, my best friends.
Those are experiences that you can't explain to other people.
No way. That's why I said I'm glad I got a video. A lot of places we went, a lot of it was done by video. One of the guys had a video camera, and lucky he did. A lot of times, still pictures don't tell you everything. He did a lot of videotaping wherever we went. Yeah. Even the well drilling unit, that was a little different too. I never had no experience with that. But the guys in the unit knew what they were doing. I more or less just had to do the paperwork, pretty much. Yeah, that's what it amounted to.
Where were you well drilling at?
There was a little church camp in South Dakota. But they were in Honduras when we were there too, and I talked to them a little bit there. They were trying to receive a bit that Montana unit left there. We were trying to retrieve it, but yeah, I don't regret anything, nothing.
Words of advice to anybody who's considering a military career.
If you get a chance, I'd definitely recommend it. It teaches you values that you don't learn in civilian life. There's so many different values you learn in there. Respect. One of the biggest things for me is supply economy. You know, how to save stuff instead of waste it. And then the camaraderie. You know, you can't beat it. You go through things that you'd never do in civilian life. Oh, I definitely recommend it for anybody. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd do it again.
The experiences that you had, you can't learn in a textbook, and you can't really put a dollar figure on those.
Oh, no. When I was in the medical corps, they said what we learned in 3 months was equivalent to a student nurse in their third year training. I mean, but till you actually use it, you're right, yeah. You have to have hands-on.
So,
That's the biggest thing. On-the-job training, they call it OJT. Without it, you don't learn anything. But we had some nice experienced people when we went somewhere. Some of the guys had civilian skills that they did that matched to what we were doing. We were at South Dakota one time. They wanted our NCOs to work with this regular Army unit and send their NCOs to work with us. We didn't have the time because we had to put up some cabins, and they wanted us to teach them how to do it. We put up 3 to their 1 cabin. That's how much difference there was. So we were proud.
lots of valuable skills learned.
Very much so. I know you can talk to anybody, some of the skills we learned, how we finished our own houses, like the basements and stuff, and just stuff we've learned out there. So yeah, it helped me, I know that. But I'd definitely do it again. I love it.
Any last words?
No, not really. Just proud to have served.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to putting this all together and seeing the final product. So
Do it good. Make me sound better than what I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Shue,
How old are you?
65.
You look 25.
No, I'm 65.
Okay, so it looks like you've got your service in the Army from 1980 to 1994. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's pretty much 4 or 5, I don't remember, but I was in a long time. Let's see, I joined in 80, and I joined the National Guard. And I was in the Guard for 6 or 7 years. And while I was in the Guard, they sent me to LPN school. So I got that through the Army. And then I transferred to the reserves. And I was there until I got out. And I was in the 311th evac hospital. And my husband was in the same unit. And we served in Desert Storm.
Together.
Yeah, we both had to go together. We wanted to go separately, but at that time, the paperwork didn't get through, so we both had to go together, and we left 4 babies at home, 4 little ones. My youngest wasn't even a year old yet. I cried a lot, but we did it. His parents came from Washington, D.C. to take care of our kids, and they were in their early 80s. And we left New Year's Eve, so they spent the winter in Elgin with our kids on a farm. But
From Washington, D.C. to Elgin.
yeah, in the middle of the winter.
And Bismarck to Desert Storm. And then little kids at home.
Yeah.
Without mom and dad.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And well, we had a clinic in Elgin. My husband was a doctor, and I was his nurse, and we had to run our clinic when we were gone too, so we had to hire a doctor, and yeah, but we did it.
Oh my goodness.
And we weren't gone that long. It seemed like it. We were gone about 3 months. But when we first got called up and first left, they told us we were there for the duration of the war, and we're like, but no, it was good. And it was a good experience once I was there. I mean, I would never, ever not give it. It would have been way more awesome if I was single, had no kids to worry about at home, but it was such a humbling experience. We were there. We were deployed to the United Arab Emirates, and we were supposed to be an evac hospital. Well, there was never any casualties. So we lived out in these tents outside a hospital, and we worked with the local people, just taking care of their people. And learned a lot. And then my husband was bored, so probably 10 days before we came home, they were asking for volunteers to go up north to take care of prisoner of wars. So my husband wanted to go, but he wouldn't go unless I went. So I was the only female that went up with like 15 guys. And that was really an experience. Within a week we processed over 10,000 POWs. And it was so sad, but they were so happy to be taken in as prisoners. I mean, they had wounds and stuff from previous wars, and there was old men in their 80s and little boys that hadn't even gone through puberty yet that had to fight. So it was good. I mean, it was good. It was very humbling to me, and to know that these people didn't want to fight like we didn't want to fight. It's not us that wants to do it. It's the crazies out there. So, but it was a good experience. We had don't ask me how we ever got a big old TV out in the middle of the desert, but at night people would get videos from their loved ones and stuff, and we would all sit and watch them all. And I had one that my sister-in-law had sent, and they had gone to our farm. And our farm's only like a half a mile out of town, so it wasn't like, but my sister-in-law had gone because it was my son's first birthday, and she was taking a video of him. And on our farm, we have apartment buildings. And all of a sudden, the buildings caught on fire. Everybody's running around screaming and stuff, and I'm like, oh no. It was just bizarre, but all turned out all okay. But that was, and then after Desert Storm, I came home and I had 2 more children. So I said, no, I'm done. I did my time. I'm not leaving my kids again. So, because we left 4 and then came back and had 2 more. And
Tell me about your decision in 1980.
well, I went in because when I was younger, it was kind of wild. Well, everybody's got their wildness in them when they're young. And my 2 younger sisters had both joined the Guard, and my dad was so proud of them and stuff and everything. And I'm just like, then I thought, well, maybe I'll try it. So that's what I did.
Did you ever consider any of the other branches?
No, because I didn't want to go active duty. I just, wanted a weekend-like thing. But I did go active duty when I was in nursing school and stuff. But later on, when I was married and had kids, I wouldn't have minded going active duty and my husband. But we were too busy in Elgin.
Yeah.
So.
Any other remarkable moments that you think of?
Can I tell you this one incident? It's kind of funny. It's very funny to me. When we were in the desert and we were up north and we were taking care of prisoners, the desert would get so cold at night, just cold. Like you go out in the morning to wash your face and you have a basin of water and you'd have to chip the ice off. And our showers weren't heated, so it was like needles sticking in you. And I just craved a hot shower. So I'm at work one day and this military police comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, Shoo, you want a hot shower?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'd die for a hot shower." He goes, "Well, meet me at this place at a certain time." So I went, and the showers were like squares, and they were like wooden with your head sticking out and your feet sticking out. But I was in there and had this nice hot shower, and then pretty soon this guy came in the shower next to me, and he looks at me and I look at him, and I just kind of turn away and I just keep showering because I said, I'm not getting out of here until I'm done. And so, it was about 10 years later, my daughter was in the reserves at that time, and she was in Washington going to nursing school. And the sergeant major had spoke to them, and then he saw her name tag and it said Shue, and he goes, Shue, he goes, I know your mother. Because of that incident in the shower. It was funny, but you know, you got to do what you got to do when you're cold and stuff.
Right.
But otherwise, it was. Being in the military, I loved it because you had so many good friends. You know, you think in high school that your high school friends would be your buddies forever. It's your Army buddies that are, because you go through the best of times and the worst of times, and so yeah, I really like that. But otherwise, it was all uneventful. So
Other than everything else going on.
yeah, it was just a normal thing, except for when we got called up. Yeah.
What was that like
What?
when you got called up?
Well, we kind of knew we were going to, okay? So we had his parents come, and I think it was like 3 days before Christmas, and we get the phone call, and the first sergeant goes, this is a roaring bull, and that means we're going. So then we had to go to Bismarck for a week, because we had to, process to go. We had to get our affairs in order. We had to have wills drawn up. You had to have all your shots. You had to just get everything over. I had braces at the time. I had to have my braces taken off. You just had to get everything done. And you were supposed to stay in Bismarck, but my husband and I would sneak to Elgin every night. We had our kids there. And then the last night we were leaving on New Year's Eve, about, I don't know, it was 6 or 7 in the morning. So we stayed in Elgin before I got all of our gear ready and said goodbye to our babies and stuff. And then we just drove to Bismarck. We never slept because then we got there, and then we'll all get on these buses to go to Fort McCoy, and there's all these people at the airport, at the unit. And my dad was there, and my dad was like, oh, Kathy, I wish I could go for you. But it was okay. And we went to Fort McCoy, and at midnight, we're on these buses, and everybody's celebrating with fake champagne and stuff, and I'm just crying because of my babies. And then we get to Fort McCoy, and we were there about a week. And it's crazy because they processed us for the desert. And here Fort McCoy's got 2 or 3 feet of snow, and it's below zero, and we had to do all this stuff out in that. It wasn't anything like the desert. And then we flew over, and we were the last 3 planes in when the war started. And we're flying in, and pretty soon you see these fighter planes on each side of your plane guiding them in, because the war had started. And then we landed. We didn't know anything. They took all the lower enlisted and the officers, and they left the sergeants, and I was a sergeant then. They left us to unpack the planes, and then they all got on buses and went to where we were supposed to go. And we get off the plane, and everybody's in their mop gear. Mop gear is what they use during an attack, if you're going to have a biological or something. So you're all in a mask and all this, and all these people have their weapons drawn, and we get off there, and I'm like, oh. But we unpacked the planes, and we took all of our Army stuff with us. We had every one of us had 2 huge duffel bags full of stuff. Well, we didn't use any of it while we were there because they wanted us to dress like the local people. So they made us all nursing outfits and stuff like that. And then we would have to ride home to get regular clothes because we didn't take any because we just took our BDUs. The only time you ever wore your BDUs was when you were on call, or like, there was, okay, the doctors and the nurses, we would do these drills where we'd go out to the airport and like, in case casualties came in, and we would do triage on them and stuff and bring. That's the only time you ever wore your uniforms.
Any words of advice? Sounds like you've had a child that has followed in your footsteps now.
2 of them.
And then you followed in your, was
My
it your
dad.
dad's footsteps? So for anybody else that might be considering this as a career, do you have any words
Oh,
of
it's
wisdom?
excellent career. I think me personally, everybody should do a 2-year commitment. Just because it teaches you a lot. It teaches you discipline. And, you know, you have so many young people out there these days that they just, you know, if you had to do a 2-year commitment, and then you meet such good people and stuff, and you work hard together. I mean, you know, sometimes really hard together, and I think it's just good. It's good. And I have my niece, and she was in Afghanistan twice, and her husband is going to retire soon. And my daughter was in Afghanistan, and she was there for a year, and she's got some PTSD, but she saw things I didn't see, which I'm grateful for, because, and I think it makes you appreciate the country more. You know, my husband, he was a colonel. He was born in China. He came to the U.S. and he became a citizen, and he you know, fought for our country. I mean, because he so believed in it. So.
Well, thank you to you and your entire family for your service.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thanks.
My name is Marguerite, M-A-R-G-R-E-T, Marine Earhart.
Okay. Is Earhart your maiden name?
My maiden name was Helfenstein,
Oh.
Helfenstein.
Wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
Couldn't get it on my dog today.
Yeah, I bet. So, where did you grow up?
My parents were in the military, so I was everywhere. I lived in London, I lived in South Dakota, I lived in Colorado, I lived in Texas, I lived in North Dakota, but I went in the military from Texas
Is that where your family was living at the time?
at that time.
Okay. And your dad what was he in the military?
He was a master sergeant in the Air Force.
No, hence why you moved around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my real father was a sergeant in the Air Force.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's incredible. So it looks like your dates of service here, 1969 to 1976, and then 76 to 97. Tell me what happened in 1969.
I joined the Marine Corps. What a shock.
What a shock.
Yep. You really learn a lot. You have to listen. No talk back, listen. I went to boot camp in Paris Island. Yep, that was in March. It was kind of ugly. And then I was stationed in Cherry Point, which was a naval unit. There were only 100 of us women Marines there.
How old were you?
21.
Okay, you're 21 years old in 1969, and you're going to go join the Marine Corps? Who does that?
Not too many bright people.
How'd that go?
Well, I wanted to join the Air Force, and they had a lot of stipulations in those days, and I didn't meet them. So the Marine Corps recruiter came. I'd been trying to get in the Air Force for a couple of months. So the Marine Corps recruiter came and he said, "Do you want to join the Marine Corps?" I said, "Do they have ladies?" He said, "Sure." And I was gone in a week.
How many more women were there when you showed up to boot camp?
Well, there was enough, I don't remember exactly, but there was enough for platoons and units. I had 2 females as a warrant officer and a staff sergeant as my leaders.
Well,
Didn't hurt me a bit.
no. No.
Quite an experience.
Yeah. Tell me 1 or 2 things that stands out for you during that time.
Well, you had to learn to do what was said at the time. You didn't do anything on your own. You were kind of like a baby learning to take orders. I learned bookwork is what schooling I went to in the Marine Corps. So I had to go to a school to learn that. You had to be in at a certain time. You had to be up at a certain time. You couldn't go wherever you went or wanted to. When I got there, they took all my rings and watches.
What about glasses? What did they do with glasses if you wore glasses?
You had a certain kind of glass. Excuse me. At that time, it was like a black cat eye. Everybody wore the same frame.
Girls different than guys? Guys the same as girls?
I think the guys might have been a little more round, but the girls.
Do you keep in touch with any of your friends from that time?
No. It's been 50 years or so, yeah.
Can you think of any times that the girls versus guys had some kind of a rivalry or playing pranks on each other or anything
No.
like that? No?
We had our own barracks and our own platoon leaders, and they had their own barracks and platoon leaders.
Got it. Yeah.
They did a lot more than we did. When I first went in, they didn't allow the females to go overseas, and we didn't carry a rifle, and we didn't go to the field. We were strictly set behind to take over the men's bookwork so they could go to war.
So what are your thoughts on that for how things have changed?
I think it's okay for females to go overseas, but not, to me, not every female is able to do it. Now, when I was in the Army, they put a pack on me, a backpack, 50 pounds. I couldn't hold it. I fell over. Some women can, some women can't. It's kind of like your transgenders now. the women can't do what the men can do.
So tell me about your switch then from Marines to Army.
Well, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I came back here. And there was no Marine units around here. One was in Minneapolis and one in Billings. And I wasn't going to drive back and forth. And I did want to get as much time in as I could. So I went into the Army Reserves, into a medics unit, and I became a medic.
What did you think about that transition?
It was really different. The Marine Corps is more strict somehow. I had a really hard time when I came in because I was used to pomp and circumstance, stand at attention, throw a wave, and in the Army, they didn't do that. And when I came into the Army Reserves, I didn't have to go to boot camp. If they came in from other Air Force and whatever, they had to go to boot camp. But I was a Marine, so I didn't have to go to boot camp. But they handed me this rifle, and I said, what am I going to do with this? He said, you're going to fire it. And I said, oh. And we went out in the field, which I had never done. So it was really different. I remember the first time we were going to go out in the field, they didn't tell me what they did. So I came with my little suitcase and my nightgown. Well, when you're out in the field, you're in your uniform the whole time.
So having been raised in a military family, and then you enlisting, how were you prepared and how were you completely surprised?
Well, my real father and my stepfather were Air Force. So it was really, Air Force was really different from the Marine Corps.
In what way?
They had both been in over 20 years, so I never really saw anything that they did. One flew planes and one worked on planes, which the females in the Marine Corps couldn't do until when I got out in 1976. Then they opened all the fields and the females could go and do everything.
Was there ever a time that you wished you could have done more or felt held back or in those early days?
Well, not really, because I wasn't exposed to anything other than the guys would come back from Vietnam, and a lot of them weren't in good health when they came back.
Did you ever wish you could?
No.
Yeah.
My husband was in the Navy, and he was in Vietnam, and he didn't get into actual battle. He was a builder, but he saw people getting killed, and he was in the foxhole, so I was glad I didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could go back and do it all over again, would you?
You know, it didn't hurt me. I always said with my kids, being my husband and I both were in the military, that if they wanted to do it, I wouldn't stop them. But they were in the time where there was no draft. My son was no draft, and my daughters had no interest.
Is there anything that really stands out for you in this time between 1969 and 1997?
Well, we were in the Vietnam War, and then we went in the Saudi War, and I was supposed to go to Saudi at that particular time, but I ended up in the hospital, so praise God I didn't have to go. But my sister and her husband went.
What was that like to see them leave?
Well, I really didn't want to go because of all the things that we had to prepare for. And I wasn't sure, being a medical unit, what we would do or what we had to do. So I was sad to see them go, but glad I didn't have to.
What do you think is the biggest values or life lessons that you learned that you had take away from this experience?
Well, you grew up pretty fast. War or no war, you grew up because the Marines are really staunch. More so than any of the other services that I know. Because when I tell somebody I was a Marine, they say, whoa.
It carries a badge of honor.
Yes.
Any words of advice that you would give to somebody who is considering joining the military? Would there be a branch that you would recommend, or how would you,
Well,
guide them through that process?
I would say, think about it. Now you can't get out as easy as you could. When I first went into the Marine Corps, it was 18 and 19-year-old girls who had no idea what they were in for. And a way to get out of the military at that time was to get pregnant. And many of them did because they just couldn't handle it. Now you can be in and be in that situation. But think about it. It's a lot. It's really just a job, but more stern. And that's how I learned it. I would go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning and get off at 5. That's any job. We had to get up first, clean up the barracks, get ready, go to mess, and then to work. People didn't like that. They wanted to sleep in, do their own thing, and that's not easy.
What other ways do you think that you saw the military change from the time you entered until the time that you retired?
Well, when I went in 1969, the women could not go overseas. We never went into the field. We never handled M16s. So when I went into the Army, which was 6.5 years later, what a shock. They handed you the M16, you had to learn how to fire it and clean it, and that was your baby. And we went into the field, and you had to stand duty. In the Marine Corps, you had a 4-hour duty you had to stand until you became an NCO, and then you had the whole evening, and you were in charge of everybody. In the Army, you just had that 4-hour duty, and it could have been any time of the night, and you had to be out there with that M16.
What was it like to adjust back into civilian life when you were all done?
It was hard.
Yeah, tell me about that.
It was hard. It took me, that's why I served 6.5 years in the Marine Corps, because you only had a 3-year tour. I got out for 3 months and I just couldn't handle it. So I went back in for 3 years, and I was in a unit and I cleaned up their office. So that's why it was 6.5 years. Well, when I went into the Army, after being in there all those years, you just kind of don't know what to do. You're kind of in oblivion.
Yeah. So how about when you were done with the Army? What was that like?
Well, I had 4 kids while I was in the reserves. So you could get out for 3 months, so to say. You didn't get any points, and then you could go in and start getting your points. So I had 3 kids while I was bounced like a ball.
Yeah. How do you think your military experience affected your family?
They just thought at first I was pretty strict. And their dad, he was kind of he wasn't strict, I was. But they're proud of it. My grandkids, on whatever day it is, make me pictures, and Grandma and Grandpa were in the service, yeah.
Any last words?
No, like I said, think about it. It won't hurt you. In fact, it's good for you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay, that's Michael J. Horner, and he's my husband, and he was in the National Guard for 11 years, and he served twice during that time.
Do you know where he served?
Yes, he was at Fort Lewis the first time. No, Fort Chaffee the first time in Arkansas. And then he got called back in again in 61 because he had a critical RS. So he was in Fire Direction Center. And that's what they needed when they called him back in. And at the time, we had 2 little ones, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Now it's milking 80-some cows. At the time, we had grade A dairy in Lynchon.
So what years did he serve?
He was in the Guard, so he served in 56 when we got married right away. He served 6 months then, and then he got called back in again in 61. But he really wasn't even supposed to be in there anymore, but that's the way things go, you know. And yeah, that was a hardship that time when I had 2 little ones and the dairy cows to worry about.
Well, I want to thank you both of you for your service.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you for coming in today.
Okay, thank you.
My husband, Joseph.
And what's his full name?
Joseph Thomas.
And when did he serve?
From 1951 to 1953
And what branch did he serve in?
in the Army.
And were you two together at this time?
No.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about his service.
He was in the Korean War. He was one of the first ones over there.
Well, tell me, when did the 2 of you meet?
When we met,
Yes.
oh, it was after I don't know, maybe 1954, maybe.
I want to thank you both for your service.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add about his story?
Well, he was very excited to come back home. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah, so
Thank you so much for bringing him in. Appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Clyde Cookert.
Okay, tell me a little bit about his service.
Okay, he went in '65, right out of high school. He entered the service. He wasn't drafted. And then he served over in Nam for about 13 months, then came home. And then we got married, and then about 3 months before he was going to get out, and I was pregnant with twins. And he went over, stepped on a mine, and he lost part of his leg below the knee, and he really came home walking, and even the orthopedic doctor, he was so surprised of Clyde, because he even used Clyde in a video saying, these guys who are coming home from Iraq don't believe that you could live a normal life after losing part of you. And so he did a thing up with Clyde for the people that came home from Iraq.
So this was your wedding picture, you said? This picture you
Yes,
brought?
it was, yes.
Oh. Tell me about the Purple Heart.
Okay, that's what he received while he was in the hospital in Guam. And then he got another Purple Heart for when he came back to the States. And the vice president presented it to him.
Can you lift that up just a little bit so we can see that? That's amazing. Well, I want to thank you both for your service, and thank you for coming in and sharing him with us today.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor.
Absolutely. So
I love talking about him.
I would too. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
David J. Volk.
Tell me a little bit about his dates of service.
He went in October of 58 and got out in October of 60. And he spent 18 months over in Germany. He never came home on leave because he'd always go visit other countries.
So you said you didn't know him at that time.
No, he came home in October, and I met him in that November at a dance in Animals.
That's pretty special.
He claims he knew me before he went in, but I never knew him.
So when you got together, you had got together with a world traveler.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to go over to Germany, but he said he wouldn't go over because it was on the boat, and it took 30 days, and he said he won't go back until they build a road across over to Germany.
Wow. What was his position?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it written down. But.
Yeah.
Oh, his position, he was a truck driver.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. Thank you both for your service, and thank you for bringing him in today.
Thank you.
Edwin.
Edwin, okay, I'm going to have you hold
Or
his.
Ed.
I'm going to have you hold his picture up, and I'm going to zoom in on him just a little bit. All right, tell me what you know about his time in the service.
All I know is he was in the Korean conflict. End of the Korean conflict, his brother was supposed to go, but he was farming with the mother, so he said he'd go, but he wasn't of age, so when he turned 18, then he went.
Okay.
1954 to 56.
And when did you two meet?
Probably 1961.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, it's a pretty special picture. So, thank you for coming in today and sharing him with us. And thank you to him for his service and for you to be there to support him too. So, thank you so much.
He did turn 21 years of age on the Eiffel Tower.
He turned 21 on the Eiffel Tower. Oh my goodness. What a journey he must have had, huh? Yeah. Thank you for sharing him.
I had her kiss that goodnight, kiss Dad goodnight. So when he come home, I said, leave your cap on so you look the same as in the picture. And she had started walking like 2-3 days before he came home. And he walked in the door and she was standing over at we were at my sister's and standing by the davenport. She turned around and she saw and she said, Dada! And away she went. She walked right across the floor to him. It was quite emotional. And I don't know if she's quit walking since.
Tell me your name.
Really, Snyder.
And who did you bring with you here?
My husband, Russell, but everybody knew him by Ginger.
What year was this picture taken?
Be 6 years ago.
Okay. And tell me, when did he serve? What were his dates of service?
1952 to 1954 in Korea.
All right. So tell me, there was a special story about this picture.
That was taken Veterans Day here at the Senior Center. And he got into his uniform that he had used when he was in service.
So he was in his 80s here, correct?
Yeah.
And you think he wore that suit or that uniform when he was about how old?
Probably, well, late 20s. About 25, 26. He was in service.
So you had this baby girl while he was in the service, right? Yeah, that must have been pretty hard.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sent a lot of pictures.
I bet.
I tried to write every day.
Did he send letters back? Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you both for your service, and thank you for bringing him in today and for sharing his story.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick Farrell.
And you were born where?
I was born October 12th, 1947 in Jamestown, North Dakota.
Okay. And tell me what years you served and what branch you served in.
I served in the Army from March of 68 to March of 70. Was stationed in Germany after all my boot camp and AITs.
Did you enlist?
I was drafted. That's why I only did 2 years.
Tell me about that.
Out of school, just doing much of nothing, and they said, come on in, we need you. So they drafted me and sent me to Fort Lewis. Went through basic there. Went through wheel vehicle mechanical school in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Went through combat track vehicle mechanic school in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Then after that, they sent me over to Germany to a town by the name of Fulda. It's on close to the east-west German border, and that was part of our duty, was to patrol and take care of the east-west German border.
So did you have an inclination to cars, trucks, motors, motor vehicles?
Prior to that, yes, I did. I've been swapping engines and working on cars when I was in high school, so the test they gave me said 2 things stood out. One, they wanted me to be an officer, which I'd have to do 6 years if I did, and I told them no, and then they sent me to the mechanic schools.
Tell me about that time in Germany. What was that like?
Very hectic. It's, 4 companies did a rotation. One week we would be on border patrol, actual jeeps driving up and down the border. The second week we would be on standby in case something happened so we could move out. We weren't even allowed to get undressed when we were on standby. You could take enough time to change clothes and a quick shower, but other than that, you eat, worked and slept in your clothes. In the third week, we were on a NATO standby because we had a NATO arms depot not too far from our place. So if anything happened, we'd have to go over and help them out there. And then the fourth week, we had some free time if we weren't in the field. Out of the 14 and a half weeks I spent in Germany, or 14 and a half months I spent in Germany, I spent over 6 of those in the field, in Grafenwehr or Vielflicken, doing TCQC, tank crew qualifications. I drove an M60A1 tank, and we would do gunnery ranges and night maneuvers, target practice with the big gun and the smaller guns. So 6 weeks of living in the field. 6 months, pardon me.
What was that experience like to be that close to East Germany?
Well, we had an observation post we would have to take care of too. And it was kind of cute to see the East Germans come out there and check between the 2 fences, and if they found footprints in there, they got rather excited. It meant somebody managed to sneak through the fence and get across the border. And it was a minefield, so they had to try and figure out how they got past the mines. Yeah, we could look right across the border, see the East Germans running around doing their patrols and everything else.
What stands out most for you during that time?
I think the fact that we came in from Grafenwehr after spending 30 days there, and they told us in 2 weeks we had an AGI inspection. And we maxed it out. Every section of I think there's 3 or 4 phases of the annual general inspection there, and we got max numbers on everything except the company commander's comments. Plus that at that time when we had just gotten back from Grafenwehr, we had a tank in the company that had set the record for points on the TCQC course. That was a good 2 or 3 weeks there. That was just right. Well, one night we were in a night fire, and we were using one of the tanks as a spotter, the big spotlight on the tank to light up the target. Well, the guy that was in the tank that was supposed to be shooting at the target followed the light the wrong way and shot at our own tank. Or like the time when we were in the National Guard in Minnesota, we went to Little Falls for 2-week summer camp. 3 different companies went out for night maneuvers, and they were supposed to stay awake because they were going to be attacked by a company from Kansas, part of our training. Well, the first night, they drove right up on them and actually had to wake them up. And for the first company, the second company, they came up and they weren't even camouflaged or hid. So they didn't put up much of a fight there either. And when we got out there on the third night, we had heard a couple of these tales. So we made sure we were well camouflaged, well hid, And they sent a man in to try and spy on us to figure out where we were. And we captured him, so he couldn't tell anybody where we were. And when the tank and APCs rolled in, we captured them instead. So we turned the tide on the Kansas City National Guard. But other than that, everything's been plain and simple. Well, the worst part about it is, when I first got in, was the old Army. They gave you a serial number. And then about halfway through, they decided, well, we're not going to use serial numbers anymore, and everybody can go by their Social Security number. So I had to remember 2 sets of numbers. One I will relish, but I would prefer not to do it again. Glad I did it the first time. I made it. Yes.
What was your favorite piece of equipment to drive or work on?
I pulled engines out of pretty much everything out there. But the biggest surprise I got is when I first got there, within 24 hours of landing in Fulda, getting off the train in Fulda, they loaded me up in the back of the Deuce and a Half and sent me right out to the field. And we had a tank that blew an engine, so the first thing I did is I had to swap the tank engine out.
And at that point, you realized for sure you were no longer in North Dakota.
Absolutely.
Did you meet any of the locals? Did you
yes.
have relationships, friendships with the locals?
My wife was there for a while, and we lived in the economy and had apartments off base and got to know the landlords quite well. As a matter of fact, shortly after I sent the wife home and I was getting ready to come back, the first landlady says, "You go to the PX and buy me a nice roast, I will make you a big meal." And I did, and I got there and she used that pot roast and she laid out a beautiful 6-course meal that was just fabulous. She was a good cook.
Did you keep in touch with any of your friends or, any of the people that you met or just anybody you served with?
No. I run into one. He lived in Grafenbeer, and when the reserves called us up to go down to Fort Carson 2 years after getting out, he rode back with me from Fort Carson, Colorado. So that was fairly nice. Then, no, other than that, I haven't kept in touch with any of them.
How about any fun stories or pranks that you may have played on each other on your time off?
No. Time off. Like I say, I lived out on the economy with the wife, so I didn't mess around with the boys too much until after she went back. But the big thing for spare time was sitting around playing double pinochle. So we did that fairly well. We had a consolidated mess in Fulda, but we had better food when we were in the field, because then we got just our company cooks cooking for us, and they definitely took good care of us.
So do you play pinochle here at the Senior Center?
Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Some days I do good, and some days, not very good at all.
What was that like to have your wife with you when you were serving abroad?
Well, with all the duties I had, I didn't get to spend as much time with her as I'd liked. We did take a little leave time and do some touring in Germany. Seen some old bombed out bunkers and stuff. We even visited an old Roman encampment from way back in the Roman days. They had set up like a museum. You could walk right in and you see where they lived and their equipment, their shields, spears and stuff, and it's quite interesting. Go to Germany and see the Romans.
Have you been back?
I was in the Guard and they sent us back for summer camp. We didn't go back to the same place, but there was a company that had gotten behind in their maintenance. So they sent us over there, as the Guard unit I was with was a maintenance company. So they sent us over there to straighten them up. And midweek we got to go on a tour to Munich. They got a big space needle type thing like they do in Seattle. And we got to go up as high as they'd let us. And that is a view, let me tell you.
Do you miss it? Do you miss being in Germany?
I like home. Been born and raised in this state, so it is home. It was a nice place to visit. There were plenty of nice people. Some people were a little different to us because I got there and it was not all that long after World War II. So the older ones weren't real happy we were there, but the younger ones, oh yeah, they liked our music and dress and stuff like that. And I did enjoy the beer over there.
What was that like to come back?
I came back at the time when there was a bunch of protests and stuff, and I did not receive a warm welcome home. I discharged out in Fort Dix. I stayed with my sister for a couple of days, got into my civilian clothes, and flew home. So.
Do you feel like things have changed?
Immensely. Back then, if you were a vet, you were looked down upon. Nowadays, I see people in the grocery store and they see my Army hat and they'll say, "Did you serve?" And I said, "Yes," and they thank me for my service. All the time. Even here, some of these gentlemen that haven't served and the women and stuff, they asked me if I served, and I said yes, and they thanked me for it.
And what's that feel like?
Like I spent my time well.
Maybe our country just learned a few things and we grew up a little bit.
Grew up a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely better now than it was back then. I'd heard some crazy stories about what had happened from some of the people that came back. That was not exactly nice.
What do you think were your biggest takeaways from your military experience? Biggest gifts?
Discipline. I make my bed every morning. And no, that's about it. Discipline and control.
If you were going to give anybody some words of advice that were considering a career in the military, what would your advice be?
Do it as an officer. Works out better. I've seen some men that did long time as NCOs, but did not get real high in the ranking, and it wasn't bad for them. And I've seen some that got way up there in the ranking as NCOs, and it worked out pretty good. But the higher the rank you can get out at, the better off you were. So, but if you can go in as an officer and get out after doing close to 30 years, it's a retirement that is excellent. I was just an average Joe doing his job. Did it to the best of my ability and did my time, got out. Did a little time with the National Guard. Did some of it in Minnesota, which was right across the river. And did some of it here in North Dakota. So.
Any final comments?
It was a good experience. I would suggest that kids that are getting out of high school do a 2-year stretch. You can get the GI Bill, which will help you with school, and it'll give you some discipline in how to handle life after you get out.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
And thank you for coming in today and sharing your story.
Anytime.
And we're really looking forward to seeing this all come together. So,
Me too.
thank you again.
Anytime.
But then they dropped a big one on Japan. That ended the Second World War. Then it was the Korean War. Well, I was in it for 6 months. When Dad broke his leg, cattle run over him and they broke his leg, and I went home on an emergency furlough. Anyway, we were more interested in the girls. When this German luxury liner, there were 6,000 of us on there. And all of a sudden, all the time, it was a whoop-bah, whoop-bah, whoop-bah. And they would just went around and they said, you're a first sergeant and you're a second lieutenant or whatever. Yeah. So when we got off the ship, the Red Cross was on one side, and the USO was on the other. So they had us in one spot, but they had the Korean guys were on the invasion. So when we got off the ship, all of a sudden everything was quiet. When they got off the ship, we were out on 3 decks, and they interviewed us the best that we could understand them. And so when we got off the ship, we were about from here to Main Street, away from the White Cliffs of Dover. So when we got off, they gave us an apple and I think of some cookies or something, and charged us 10 cents. So on the other side, the USO gave us whatever we wanted. And well, you can imagine what we wanted. Anyway, they just gave it to us. So we got on the ship, or on the train, and the cattle car is like this. You know, there's no walls or anything. And we were on there and we damn near froze to death. And so we come to one town, and for some reason or other they stopped the train, and there was a gondola full of briquettes on there. So a bunch of us went over there and got some, and built a fire on the floor so that we could stand it because it was so darn cold. Well, that didn't last long, and it dropped down through, and so then they stopped it, and we got off, and we got into their passenger cars were like an automobile. So you opened the door, you carried your duffel bag, and we got in, and oh, it was like heaven. And then we went all the way down to the southwest corner of Germany. Well, I knew a little bit of this dialect from a sergeant that was on the ship or with us, and he taught me a little bit of it. And this major said, "Did I see you talking to that young lady?" And I thought, "Oh, brother, I'm in trouble." And I said, "Yes, sir, you did." "Well, good." He said, "I could pull a few strings and get you into our as an interpreter." And I said, "Sir, I don't know their language that well. I know a few words." And he said, "Well, we could, our interpreter is going to get discharged." And so I said, "I could never, ever be an interpreter for you because I don't know." So he said, "Well, you could learn." And I said, "I doubt it because it's a different lingo altogether." So he said, "Well, I can't force you to stay." So we got on the train and went back up to Berlin. And I'll never forget this number as long as I live, A13. And they said, "All that I call will go to A13 Car Company." And I think, yeah, I'll be a truck driver or whatever. And they started up in the M's. And what's going on here? And all the rest of you will go to the 296 Military Police. Oh, brother. And I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do about it? Nothing. It was tough. Well, I was there for damn near a month. And the first time we had bacon and eggs for Thanksgiving dinner. And I vowed to my wife, I said, if we live for 100 years, we will never, ever have bacon and eggs for Thanksgiving dinner again. So then I couldn't go anywhere, and Paris, France is a stickiness talk. They have these urinals on the street corner, and stink, I tell you, you didn't have to know where you're at, because that was for men, I guess. Anyway, even women went in there. Anyway, I wound up going to the 296 MP Company, and that was 8 stories tall. And they had a furnace in every room. And this one guy come and he said, these Germans, they had one guy that was dressed real fancy and everything. He was, when they showed him on TV, he was one of them. And boy, they were true to their word. The minute they said, "Can you back your car in here?" And I said, "Why, absolutely." And I whipped her back in there, and there was a group of guys come. Some of them did this, some of them did that, and everything. And I went back to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and I was there for about 30 days already for an emergency furlough. And we were, the family, my family, were neighbors to Matt Dahl. And he was a commissioner of agriculture and labor. And I knew that. And so I registered at 18. And I said, I don't want to be the second one. I want to be the first one. So they said, well, we don't know whether you can drive on that new pavement or not. And I said, you just show me where you want this car or this vehicle. And I said, I'll put it in there. First sergeant, I don't know why, he disliked me for some reason or other. I don't know what was his problem. Anyway, I heard the captain tell the first lieutenant if he could only get some good American booze again, preferably, what the heck was it? But he didn't get that. And it was my turn to go down to the replacement depot, and I couldn't go very far. They flew us from Berlin down to Paris, and there we were waiting to get, and they had some kind of something was wrong with the Air Force. Anyway, we had to wait to try and get a air line to come home on.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, no big deal.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.